the Mayor's Transport Board meeting. My name is Sean Matthews and I'm the leader of Lincolnshire County Council. I'm going to be very careful what I read today because the other day I started reading the minutes of the last meeting as the start of the meeting, so it was quite confusing. It is 2 o'clock and we can start the meeting. Can I remind the board that at this meeting it will be broadcast live, and with this in mind I would like to welcome the members of the press and the members of the public watching live and in this chamber. At this meeting it will be streamed in the usual way. I would like to remind all that your comments will be remain accessible online and may be reported by the media. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned for today. So in the event of a fire, it's real. Can I say we go straight out those doors there and congregate in the car park, where we will check off everybody who's here. Can I also remind everybody to ensure that their mobile phones, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of the meeting. Also, may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone until your unit is made live and speak from your seat. Then press again when you have finished your contribution. Everybody will start shouting if you forget to do that. We will now move on to the formal agenda. I should really use my glasses. There we go. Item number 1 is the election of the Vice Chair of this board. I'd like to invite nominations for Vice Chair of the board. I'm happy to nominate Ingrid Shared, the Deputy Mayor. This is not a straightforward thing before we go into, because of the way it's set up at the moment, and we're looking at ways of altering it because obviously sometimes when Ingrid is acting as the Mayor, it becomes a little bit more complicated. However, we are where we are. So can I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, happy to second. I think Ingrid will be a great Vice Chair. But I mean, accepting of the point that you've made around when she has to deputise, I think there's always a way around that, though. The chances are likely, it's that likelihood risk all the time, isn't it? The likelihood of, you not being here and then...
That's the only option, isn't it? The only problem is if I suddenly drop out and you've got somebody sitting in my as a temporary deputy vice chair, and then suddenly they're hoisted into this position. But I'm sure the two substitutes are capable of winging it. I mean, we do all the time, so... That's right, that is right. Okay, so we'll vote on that though. So all those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, that is unanimous. We don't have to do the other votes. Ingrid, would you like to come and join me? There's loads of seats up here. I don't know which one you want to sit on. It says come and join me at the big table. I'm not sure it's quite that. But anyway, welcome. Item number 2 then, apologies and substitutions. Andrew.
We have no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, declarations of interests. Are there any other declarations other than the usual for interests on this meeting? No, thank you very much. Item number 4 then is to go over the minutes of the meeting of the Greater Lincolnshire Transport Board held on the 16th of July 2025. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting of the board on the 16th of July 25 as a correct record. Do I have a proposer?
Well, Rushing, yeah. I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. We'll now vote on these. All those in favour? Thank you. That is again unanimous. So item number 5 then is to go over to the public questions, where the board received questions from the public to the mayor, the authority and the board chairs in accordance with the combined authority procedures in rule number 20. In line with this scheme, however, there are no registered questions and therefore we can move on to item number 6. Item number 6 is Chair's announcements. At July's meeting, we agreed to approach the Department of Transport to invite them to be co-opted onto this board. In response, they have confirmed that whilst they are keen to work with the GLCCA and support our development, they believe the board is not the right place, not the right setting for the Department of Transport representation and will focus on officer cooperation instead, which I think is a bit of a shame. I'd also like to remind officers and members that we do have a busy agenda, and so far we've been doing very well. But I'd like to stress the importance of taking reports as read, and I ask that presenters summarise the key points and the type of input expected by the board. Thank you. Okay, to the crux of the meeting then. Item number 7, transport terms of reference. Can I turn to Lisa for to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. I will take the paper as read, and in essence, one of the requirements of the Constitution is that we will annually or regularly bring the terms of reference of this board back to them so that they can consider if they feel that they are still fit for purpose and if they want to suggest any amendments. So the terms of reference are attached for you at Appendix A, and comments or suggestions are invited from the board.
So, item 3.5A 1.2, just to tease Ashley slightly, it's got an Americanised authorised. I thought I'd get in there before Ashley did. Now, any other points about the Transport Board terms of reference? Stan.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5.2 on the voting, it says when a vote is required, it will be taken in accordance with the authority procedure rules. The procedure rules say a majority, including the mayor, so why don't we just put that rather than leave people to refer to another document?
A bit of whispering, I'll take your point.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's more from a perspective of consistency more than anything else, so that we're referring everyone back to how the voting will be done. The reality is that the combined authority rules are the sort of the overarching rules, and I think that what we don't want to do is stick sticky plasters on things and then there's multiple versions of the truth within the Constitution, whereas if we refer everyone back, hopefully that should be consistent.
Sorry to be a pedant, but might the sentence then say, as I've just described, with the adjunct afterwards, in line with the authority procedure rules?
We'll sort that out. Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I won't nitpick over the typos. I'd like it to be clear either from a ruling at this meeting or better still within this document that when the mayor is not here, the deputy mayor will be acting in the place of the mayor and have some, because in here it looks like the voting members are the mayor, but what I've learnt from previous meetings is it could be the deputy mayor. So without having to go back to the original authority procedure rules and so on, can we get a clear answer one way or the other? Thank you.
I thought that was already covered, but we'll cover it again.
I appreciate the point that is being made, but the reality is that, as I've already said, the overarching rules in the combined county authority rules are the ones that we would refer back to for all of the boards. It is quite clear in those rules how the quorum is, and that when the mayor isn't present, the deputy mayor has the authority to act on her behalf. So I think there's a balance, because if we just repeated what is already said, we'd probably get criticised for being repetitive. So we're trying to make it as streamless as possible, and that's why it's only said once, with the reference back into the authority rules.
Thank you. Any more questions? Jackie.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a query, really. I think the idea of having a business rep is a great idea, but is there any reason why we can't have a representative from the District Joint Committee? It seems, these meetings are not that frequent, are they? And it seems a good idea to me to have some district input to support the board going forward. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, there already is. You're one of them.
If I can try and assist. So the way the board is made up, it's 6 constituent members, it's 4 non-constituent members, and the mayor. But so the non-constituent members have a voice, but you don't have a vote. Simply just in terms of the remit of the Transport Board and the distribution of functions in terms of district and unitary upper tier council.
Yes, I do. I understand that, but it seems to me, is there no possible way within the constitution of this that the districts can have an actual voting voice at any point? Is it sacrosanct, this as it is, that there is never going to be a vote for the districts as it stands?
Do you mean the individual district councils themselves?
I understand that we're not constituent members. I understand that fully, and the constituents, the different layers. However, given that this is a county-wide body that affects the districts, and yes, we're here representing, but is there no facility within any of this, anywhere within this all-important board, for the district to have, or a representative of the districts to have a voting voice at any point?
I'll just go to Lee first of all, just because he's a bit more switched on than most of us.
Okay, so this is something, Councillor Brockway, that was negotiated through the devolution deal when the authority was first conceptualised. So the voting powers are aligned to where functions currently sit and where transition arrangements are in place. Some of the transport functions are held concurrently with the constituent authorities, and that is why voting was aligned into only being those constituent authorities for transport-related matters. For all other areas, as you know, district council colleagues have the ability to vote, but because the function is held by the constituents, that is where the voting was placed, and that was built into the constitution.
Councillor White.
Not that I need to do that, Mr. Chairman, just to concur with that. That was what we negotiated over a number of I was going to say months, years probably. So it is. We did agree that would be part of the remit, that we would not have votes in areas where we had no responsibilities.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? It's nice having a pair of eyes next to me now. It's having to do it on my own. Okay. On the recommendations then, which are detailed on page 15 of the report, do I have a proposer?
Proposer.
And the mayor, second. And a seconder is the mayor.
So, in terms of what we're agreeing,
Yep.
it is simply correcting the typographical error and rewording 4.9.
4.9.
Sorry, 5.2.
So just to clarify for everybody's awareness, the slight correction on the word authorised and the slight change to the wording with regard to the voting on 5.2. And that is what you're first proposing and seconding. Thank you. So on that then, can I ask all those in favour? And again, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 8 then is local transport funding. The report seeks to approve the allocation of local transport resource funding for 2025-26 and sets out the principles of distributing future funding, ensuring the coordinated investment and development of transport schemes across Greater Lincolnshire. The report recommends that the board, A1, approves the 2025-26 allocation of local transport resource funding to the authority and the constituent authorities in paragraph 9, and 2, approve the approach and principles of the allocation of local transport grant and the local transport resource 26-27. Over to Debbie Simpson.
I'm not Debbie Simpson, but I'm going to introduce the paper. So Ruth Carver, Deputy Director. Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to talk us through the paper and then hand over to Debbie on the assurance and finance side as Section 73. So devolution set the process for the combined authority to become the strategic authority, working closely with the 3 constituents authorities, and the regulations conferred powers on the combined authority to manage transport related funding for Greater Lincolnshire. At the last meeting of this board, when you met on the 4th of June, the authority approved the passporting of circa 100 million, which is table 1 within your paper, for a whole host of areas such as active travel, bus improvements, maintenance, etc. The same report asked officers from the 4 authorities to work together to develop principles of funding allocation for future years. So this is the report that you have in front of you. The Chair has set out what those recommendations are. We are seeking approval for the allocation of the Local Transport Resource Fund for this current financial year. This is covered in section 5 and is outlined in table 2 of your paper. The principles for future allocation of the Local Transport Resource Fund, which is effectively revenue, is set out in section 15. And this really recognises through development that local transport revenue resource funding can fund resource within organisations, but it also very importantly funds the development of capital schemes for future years so that we have a pipeline of projects, capital projects for transport for future years. The third area of the paper covers the future approach and policy for local transport grant, which is effectively capital projects on the highways network, improvements, capital improvements. And this is for next financial year 26-27, and this is all set out in section 16. The proposal within the paper sets out that 95% of this fund is granted to the constituent authorities for delivery, and that 5% of the fund is initially retained by the combined authority. As we are discussing later in the agenda and from this full agenda today, the authority is developing a single local transport plan for the whole of Greater Lincolnshire. We are developing a Greater Lincolnshire transport group which will advise the Mayor and will advise the combined authority, Transport for Greater Lincolnshire. And we are undertaking work that will transition some of the transport functions into the authority. So these initiatives which are underway may bring forward delivery opportunities which will be implemented in 26-27. Therefore, the proposal of 5%, which was initially retained by the combined authority, some of the development projects will come through those initiatives. And we're talking 5%, 1.3 million out of the 25 million for the local transport grant. I'm going to hand over to Debbie now to talk through the process of achieving that division of allocation and the assurances that we need to seek from constituent authorities and working with government for DFT. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can just firstly draw members' attention to Table 1. It has been noted that a couple of the figures in there have been transposed. I think some of you have noticed this. So maintenance block and a new fund pothole allocations between North East Links and NLC are they've been transposed. So we will alter that. Having said that, the accurate allocations have already been approved. So that's just an error in the paper that will get rectified. So, as Ruth said, the proposal for allocation of funding is that the authority initially retains the funds. We seek proposals for expenditure that are aligned with the Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Plan, and then GLCCA will retain 5% of that to support allocation of the grant and management of it. We'll put the figures into our annual budget setting process. Around that, we're going to put some tight governance and we'll put in place systems based on SIPFA and government frameworks. And this will ensure, firstly, that schemes and allocations align with agreed priorities. It will ensure transparency and accountability over the outcomes and the expenditure, and it'll also ensure that funds are used exclusively for the purposes that were intended. We'll set up a governance group that will oversee this area of activity, and we will continually review what's happening in terms of expenditure and outcomes and report back to the various committees. Thank you.
Ruth and Debbie, thank you very much for the report. It's quite detailed, and I thank you for the efforts that you put into it. We also have Andy Cornby, who is the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'll now hand over to Andy to give us a report on that. Thank you.
The Chairman, the report did come to the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. The councillors reviewed it and they made some comments which we've asked to be included in any future drafts of the report. They mentioned the 5% held by the combined authority. We sought confirmation that the expenditure of those would be driven by the mayoral strategic priorities. We also asked that, as was mentioned then, that the distribution of those funds were driven by DOT guidance or rules. And we asked for assurance processes that the control programs would have a full suite of controls. And then there was assurance requested that there would be ensuring equity of investment across the entire county. I think that's a précis of all the comments.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, Dame Andrew.
With those points, especially the last point. I agree with those points, especially the last point, because this is why I've been sort of fighting for this type of funding, because to me, I don't have any NIMBYism. I want to ensure that it goes where it's most needed, the money, and we have the strategic overview which will be fed in from obviously the Transport Board and the rural transport groups, etc., and Transport for Greater Lincolnshire, and we need those funds to be able to come up with this plan and make sure it's widely spread across the county, because to me we know out there, all politicians know out there, that everything gets deemed as through the Lincoln lens, that it's Lincoln centric, and we need to change that rhetoric.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Orphan.
Thank you. Well, first of all, just to say that I would like to thank the Mayor and the officers for issuing the supplementary papers. Clearly, some of that's in relation to scrutiny work, which is good. It shows our scrutiny is contributing towards the papers that we see and hopefully the decision-making process, which is why we set it up to be a scrutiny-first process, which is a healthy way of doing business on a combined authority level. I think the first point was really around item 10, which I think was referenced earlier around assurance. You know, the Mayor has a mandate. It's incredibly important that, and I know she believes in the delivering at pace, because nobody wants to make a policy decision and then sit and wait forever. So I think just a point there, which is we need to make sure that assurance, we don't end up with a duplication of the assurance process, bearing in mind that the three constituent authorities here are, you know, have run a local highway programme, they're public bodies with public sector accountability attached to them. And you can see in any number of combined authorities where you end up with two lots of business processes, two lots of, you know, and you ain't going to get pace to deliver if your assurance framework duplicates. So I think there's got to be a trust element to that, to make sure that once that assurance is sought from one of the combined authority partners, then that is enough. It should be measured and they should be accountable for that, but we don't want duplication there. So I think it's important that that context is framed. And I also think it's important it comes back here for oversight in that space, because again, if you do it twice, it's not what any of us believe in. We don't believe double process. We want outcome and delivery, don't we? And that's the pace that we need to be able to reconcile. 19, it talks about priorities, and I think there are some healthy priorities there. I think there could be an opportunity to add to those priorities to achieve our aims in this space. It talks clearly about improving connectivity. I think we could be more specific about that to get about outcome and talk about strengthening rural and urban connectivity, which is the issue there. If it's a bit bland, it's not. We need to be quite specific in the way that people read this. It talks about enhancing journey satisfaction. Well, I think we know that we need to improve the reliability and experience of travel, which is what residents are telling us. So sometimes you can be quite bland in what you're trying to say as a catch-all, but it misses the purpose of what residents feel is their experience. It makes comments around emissions and air quality, but I think most of us would know that if you're able to improve connectivity, you don't get stalling cars, so therefore they're not standing cars are where the bulk of your emissions come from, so therefore, you know, the ambition should be bigger than just the smaller element of the outcome rather than the other bit. I did wonder, because I know the conversation I've had previously with the Mayor around bus transport, if there could be scope to add enabling people and goods to move easily and affordably. So you've got a purpose behind the context there. And then also I think we should, in everything that we do, even though it's just transport, it would be helpful to say we want to support access to jobs, education and communities. So again, we're putting some purpose behind some of those elements of the priorities. I think the essence of taking 5% is, you know, I mean, after I'd stopped crying at the thought of the money not having there, I absolutely accept that the combined authority has to have, you know, strategic funding for its purpose. And I think the point that's been made today around equity, we all have to see that we're getting something out of it. Otherwise, you know, you do end up with, as the Mayor narrates perfectly, as the Lincoln only model. Lincoln does well, everywhere else does poorly. And that's, you know, that's not good for any of us. And the combined authority will be judged specifically on that. And we can't afford for people to think that that's the reasoning behind it. The only item 20, I think specifically around the proposals, I think it would be nice to be able to amend the report to say that the Transport Board has some purpose in that space as well, because accepting of the fact there's got to be a business planning process, assurances need to be there in terms of purpose, priorities and deliverability, but having had the recommendation, and it's a transparency point really more than anything, you know, officers can make those references around whether a project is suitable or not, but fundamentally having a public transparency oversight at a committee is quite important. So I think, you know, I think seeing that would be helpful. And then just a final point on this, which is around specifically, that's the oversight point, specific point about time frame. So I think, you know, certainly from the early draft to this paper, we've seen a move to talk around making sure that, well, first of all, a commitment to say that the money can come back to the authorities if the combined authority isn't able to spend it, which is good. But I think a timescale mechanism as to when projects could come in by would be helpful to have as part of this. So if it's all submissions, all projects need to be submitted to the combined authority by September, and then the money defrayed by, I use September as an arbitrary date. I'm not, you know, if it's September, then clearly there'd be an opportunity to spend by the end of March. Otherwise, you see, if we got funding back in November, there's a reasonable chance we wouldn't be able to spend it because our climate doesn't afford us scope to resurface many roads in the winter months. So you end up having money back that we can't spend. So I think we need some purpose behind some timescales there, because again, if we've gone through all of this to make sure that the combined authority has some strategic transport funding, and then we're not able to spend it, then you know the pain or the anguish of going through this, the purpose of this element of the report is lost. So I just think those timescales, that oversight, and then reinvigorating the priorities as I've proposed, I think as an addition to the recommendation, I think would help us give some extra focus on what the ambition is here, accepting of the fact that, you know, in an ideal world, everybody would get their 5% and do what they did with it. But that way, we wouldn't get the strategic transport funding capacity that we know we need to, because, you know, fixing the potholes every day is not going to enable you to get some of the bigger junction works, some of the bigger transport infrastructure things away. It's not.
How can I put this? Maybe we need to have a bit more of a succinct.
There's 3 points to it. You've got 2 points to your you know I've already thought about this, right? So there's 2 points to your recommendations. I think we add to it that we add to the priorities to, which is those that I've listed around, and it's recorded, so you know it can be captured from.
But if we're going to vote on it,
oh, absolutely. So you know, enabling people and goods to travel affordably, supporting access to jobs and communities, instead of improving connectivity, strengthening rural and urban connectivity, and instead of enhancing journey satisfaction, improving reliability and experience of travel.
So what I would say on this generally is this it's kind of a living document, and it will evolve and develop, and maybe that's something for another edition of thing.
And you know, I would agree with that point. The problem is when you're setting good policy, if you're not really explicit about what your policy intentions are, they don't get transposed in the way that you'd like them to. They don't. You know, I'd like to tell you in 22 years of local government that that's been the case, but it hasn't. So I think you're better off having it now set out exactly what you're trying to achieve, and I appreciate that you know there's a bit of indulgence there, but it does help the process. And you know, maybe the mayor will have a view on that, but it's purposefully trying to help the process.
Go.
Point, please, if I can come on the point, please, Chair. Look, you made some really valid suggestions, but I mean, look, we've got our rural transport group coming up. We're going to have our Greater Lincolnshire board. I think this is best moving to our next meeting, and then any suggestions we can formulate at the next meeting. I think that's a far fairer one, because, I mean, look, the districts might come up with some suggestions as well. I don't want to see us adopting something, even though they're very reasonable today. I want to ensure we've got other voices heard. So I do think it can be deferred, Chair. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. What are your views on that, Councillor?
Everybody's had the papers at the same time to be able to contribute towards the debate. They have, haven't they? You know, that's the reality. So if anybody wanted to add to it, I accept the fact that at the next meeting...
There's a lot. You're asking for a lot to be added.
Yeah, but I make the point that, you know, there is... The next meeting there is an opportunity, because it's not... The funding clearly doesn't get top slice until April. So clearly there is an opportunity between now and then to refine some of the points that are being made. So I'm happy for that. As long as we're able to capture them and include them in a report to the next committee, I'm fine with that.
Back to the Mayor.
Look, we're all politicians around here. We want our clips for social media. We live in that kind of age. But look, we agree on a lot of these points, but I think it's about fairness. And it's also these other two groups that they feed in. And also, I mean, the Economic Advisory Board that we had today, and Councillor Jackson was there as well. I'm sure they'll have a view as well. So I think we've got far too many stakeholders to actually add this today. And I think wider scope and discussions to then bring it to the next meeting is a far fairer system, but that's in my opinion.
I agree. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to navigate my way around the report. There's 4 different sets of money. In Table 1, in paragraph 3, we've got 100 million, which I guess is all the money available for transport from all the authorities and everywhere. And please put me right when I'm wrong. In paragraph 5, we've got 1 million. So that's 1% of the previous number. And that's local transport resource funding. In the table in paragraph 9, I don't understand the figure in paragraph 8, which says 423120. Is that the same as the 423722?
If I may, I'll just talk you through the figures. So table 1 is of monies that have already been approved by the Transport Board back in June, and the headings are there, you know, active travel, etc. So that's all from DFT. That has already been approved and distributed out to the constituent authorities. So that's looking back at a previous decision, giving you information effectively. Put my glasses on. Section 5 is the decision that we are taking on this year's funding. So that is revenue, resource funding. So that's not included in the table up above. Then you go on to talk about the capital funding. This is for next financial year. So this is for 26-27. And so that is seeking approval for the principles of it, but it's giving you an indicative amount and how that might be considered. The question that you asked between the 423, 120 and 7, they are the same figure actually. It's just been an error in the paper. So that is the money that will be retained by the combined authority to undertake work on the local transport plan, to undertake work on transition work for transport functions, other things that are on the agenda kind of later on.
Thank you.
Thank you. That makes more sense of it. So, for clarity, the number you're talking about is 423722. That's the decision number.
Under the CCA number of 423, yes.
Yes. Okay. And then, that's what stays with the GLCCA from the resources coming in for revenue and resources this financial year. Next year, we're expecting 25 million. Is that right?
That's capital funding. So the figure that you've been talking about there being retained is for this financial year and revenue. The 25 million is for, to simplify, capital, and it is a forecast for next financial year.
Okay, and of that capital, the mayoral authority will keep 5% unless it becomes unallocated, in which case it will be reallocated.
Correct.
So my remaining thing is the floor. So the 30% that's mentioned in paragraph 8, so 70% of it will be passported across, 30% of it will be an equal split, so that's 10% each for each of the constituent authorities.
No, that refers to a DFT allocation of how they allocate funding in that pot. So there is a methodology that sits behind this, which is developed by DFT, and it's a 70-30 split of a methodology.
Okay, I'll read up on it later.
There is a very full detailed guidance note on the DFT website.
I hope there is. So then, when the money is passported across, when it gets to Lincolnshire County Council, I've had people ask me yesterday and today about transport, for example, in Bourne, connectivity by public transport, actual travel from Bourne to Grantham, Lincoln, anywhere else in the county. Fair question, but is that a question that I should be taking to County Council to ask, or is it a question that I should be asking the Mayor in a meeting that's in this authority?
So for this financial year, we passported funding across and had a light touch governance system within that. So those questions should be directed to the relevant authority. In future years, what we're proposing is there is a lot more governance and assurance in that, and therefore you, through this transport board, would be able to get updates from that, but the questions should still, on the whole, be kind of directed to the authority in that way.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. Just responding really to some comments that made previously, because one of your recommendations is about principles today, and you made words such as equity mentioned, but also about everybody needs to be seen to be getting something from this. Now, I understand that funding, where it's for essential work, will obviously need to be guaranteed that that's there, but I thought one of the guiding principles of setting up the authority, the combined authority, wasn't that we all have to be seen to be getting something. And that the reality is that we agreed that piecemeal funding doesn't really achieve a lot, and that actually it would be looking to strategic allocation to make sure that we got the biggest bang for our buck. And I just want to sort of stress that I thought that was the principle, all the pain of going through the formation of the combined authority, what was one of the guiding principles of why we did it. And I'd just like to think that we can hold to that. And it's not about, distribution, and it's not about piecemeal allocation, even though, as I say, I understand there will be some statutory requirements that need funding, but other than that, I didn't agree to sit here to talk about where we share it out. It's what we achieve, what we're doing. However, I would like to just, even though it's entitled at 19 proposed principles for allocation, I would have thought at point 21 on page 25 that there would be perhaps the ambition as well to look to increase the funding. So, for instance, we've just seen with the East Midlands looking for established status, which one of the things is to grant greater transport powers and greater transport funding. I would have thought that that would have been an aspiration there as well that might have been covered at point 21. But whilst you can't allocate what you've not got, but we would be looking to actually increase what we could allocate in the first place. So I would have liked to have seen a bit of ambition in the principles for following years.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Myself and Lee want to come in as well. Look, I completely agree, Councillor Wright, and we're on the same page, but my whole rhetoric was about making sure it's a fair system and it goes, as I said earlier, where it's most needed. Because we've seen across the county, certain parts of the county which has had zero investment. So we've got to make sure that we serve these forgotten communities, while at the same time having the balance right, that we have this strategic overview. Because we also, if we are going to build a new town, for example, or this big trades college, which I'd like to do, make the most of step fusion, we need to be future-proofing it and looking where will people be living predominantly, how do we get them across the county? So that will always be a forefront.
And I think you're completely correct at point 21. It is about bringing more money in. As you know from the conversations around the corporate plan for the organisation, it's about making the most of devolution, isn't it? So it's about how do we leverage devolution, how do we become an established authority in time and have more allocation as a result, and how do we get the right investment to achieve the outcomes that we want. So fully supportive of making that more explicit within what we do. It will be in the local transport plan, because clearly that's part of the ambition within that, so it should reference through.
So I had the pleasure of attending the OSMB the other day, and there was a lot of talk about equity and making sure it was fairly distributed. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, well, that's not really the idea, is it? It's the Mayor's area, and the Mayor will spend it where they want to. I understand there are different types of equality, I guess, and whilst one of the areas may have a huge investment one year, it may be spread around a few years later elsewhere. That's for the Mayor to decide, really. So whilst I understand the principle of making it equal, ultimately we are one area, and that needs to be decided by the person that's making those decisions. Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a few points. I mean, first of all, I'd just like to agree with a couple of points that Councillor Waltham made earlier on. I mean, as upper-tier councils, we have been in the Highways Authority space for quite a number of years, so we know how all this sort of stuff works. And I'd just like to reiterate the point he made about paragraph 10, that we don't want to end up duplicating assurance frameworks to, in terms of checking the work that's being done within individual Highways Authority areas. I mean, as a Highways Authority, we already carry out this assurance with the DFT, and I don't really see why, you know, once money's been passported to us and we're spending it, I don't really think it's necessary to have another assurance mechanism up to the combined authority. So I would be concerned about that duplication. I would also agree with Councillor Waltham about having a realistic date by which money that the combined authority is not going to spend on highways can be passported through to back to the individual highways authorities, because you know, it takes time to plan and procure highways work, and Councillor Waltham suggested maybe September as a suitable date. I certainly wouldn't think it would need to be any later than that. If we've got to go through a planning and procurement process to get work done by the end of the financial year, that is cutting it fairly fine, even by September, I think. So I think, hopefully we can take on board those 2 points. The other one I wanted to make was about paragraph 9, the local transport resource funding for the current year. So we've got just over £1 million in that budget pot. This, of course, is revenue funding that's used for actually planning and running highways programmes. It's not the capital side. So I have to say I was a little bit surprised to see that the combined authority wanted to take over 400,000 of that, or retain over 400,000 of that in its own pot. I appreciate that the combined authority does need some money to be able to look at how it's going to plan a transport programme, but you know, we at Highways Authority levels and in the county and the 2 unitaries, we also have transport plans that we've got to plan and deliver, and we are losing quite a big chunk of our local transport funding, which is going to make that more difficult for us. So I think that level of £423,000 being retained is rather excessive. I'd like to see a larger proportion of that money, local transport resource funding for this year, being passported through to the highways authorities.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Mayor.
We'll bring Ruth in as to answer your questions. Look, to me, what's the point of having a combined authority and have devolution if we are not having a strategic overview and getting the funds to spend the money and to plan a full strategic plan going forward? So this is devolution. Of course, we're going to be using the money for the greater good. And as our chair said, I completely agree, we are one county. I'll hand over to Ruth now, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you. So I think there were 3 points there, one on assurance, one on dates, and one on kind of revenue funding. I'll take the revenue funding and then hand over to Debbie for the assurance and date side. On the revenue funding, known as the local transport resource funding, the proposal is set out in the paper. In paragraph 8, we've set out the expenditure, effectively, of that 423,000. So it is preparation of the local transport plan for Greater Lincolnshire. It is preparation for transition of functions coming across to the combined authority. The later paper in the pack refers to that. It is also supporting costs for the national mayoral group on rural transport and supporting costs for transport for Greater Lincolnshire. And most importantly, because the powers the transport powers come across to the combined authority on the 1st of April, we have to put in place with the constituent authorities an inter-authority legal agreement that effectively during this next phase gives some of those powers back to the constituent authorities. So they're quite kind of focused combined authority costs. They're not additional resources. They're, you know, they're tasks that we need to undertake in this particular year. And then noting for future years, there's a lot more resource funding coming towards Greater Lincolnshire. That's set out in the table 2. So you see it increasing from the current 1 million up to 2.2 million and kind of growing. And that is so that Greater Lincolnshire can develop its schemes for future years. So.
Thank you. If I can come back on the point of governance, I think a couple of you made the point about wanting to avoid duplication of governance. That's certainly at the back of our minds. We have been talking about light touch governance. However, it needs to be recognised that the authority is accountable for the money it receives and ensuring that that has been spent in accordance with the fund conditions. So we will have to put some governance around that to make sure we can give those assurances back to government. If not, and anything went wrong, we would be jeopardising any future funding allocations. So there may be some governance, but we will certainly take into account that authorities have got their own systems and processes in place, and that will enable us to make appropriate arrangements from our side in terms of reviewing that. You also mentioned the question of when you may get a date by which the authority would passport any residual funds. Again, that's something that we will look at with the governance group. Certainly in terms of managing financial risk, that is a consideration for any of the grant funds that we hold, because we can't afford to under-deliver or we'll have to hand back money. So that is very much at the forefront of our financial risk management strategy, and we'll take that lens on it as well. So we will be looking at from a number of perspectives, but we will be keeping everybody informed.
Thank you both. Well, I would just say that being the leader of one of the core councils here, I do completely understand the desire to get the money back as soon as possible if we're going to get it. But the reality is, as I said once again, this is a bigger thing than the 3 constituent bodies, and we need to give them the ability and the opportunity to spend that money. And maybe that's the biggest and the best thing to do, just spend it all, and then we don't have to try and scrabble around dealing with it when we get it back. But and I think again, as this GLCCA forms and continues to develop, these things will become easier and become more straightforward. But arguing about whether £400,000 is too much or too little, or it's just about right, it seems to me is stepping stones to a better and more prosperous, more straightforward system than we've got at the moment. Craig.
Thank you. Just listening to the debate, and obviously as a district, we don't have a vote in this, but it's an interesting principle here because the public have had to understand the purpose of the Mayoral Combined Authority. And one of the things going forward is the ability to deliver over and above what the statutory councils involved in this can deliver. And I think there is a massive strategic role here for the Mayoral Combined Authority. So the debate going on about where the money sits is probably not the most relevant debate. It's about the potential delivery that the Mayoral Combined Authority can make here. And I think that's important for certainly mayors at a district where we have perceived that the funding that we've probably been allocated in the past wasn't that strategic or wasn't that primary role that we should have seen locally. So, you know, for residents, and certainly for my residents, we want to see the Mayoral Combined Authority deliver on things that have been lacking for some years and are strategic to our area. So that the idea of fair funding is probably not the necessarily point here. It's the point we made before. This is about strategic need and direction of travel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wortham.
It was just a question really about the recommendation, because clearly, you know, we've had I think a good and reasoned debate on this around how we all believe the funding should be allocated going forward on the principles with which, you know, people are engaged. It was just understanding, because clearly, you know, we're approving approach and principles in the context of the recommendation, but I think the Mayor framed an opportunity there for all boards to be able to collaborate and take a view on this, and for the points that I've made and others that have made to bring back. But if we say we approve it, does that enable that to happen? I think it might just be a technical reference, but you know, it sends the wrong message if the Mayor quite rightly says, I'm prepared to let everybody have a view on this ready for the next meeting, and the recommendation doesn't support that.
The Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll clarify exactly what I mean. I believe it's important to consult and listen, but ultimately we're not going to have too many chiefs all making the decision. You know, it ultimately rests with myself and the combined authority to, as the districts have said, to have this strategic overview and actually finally, as the saying goes, get Lincolnshire moving, because it's been neglected in so many ways. We know the rural areas, no buses, etc., and this is an opportunity. But I don't want it watering down the decision making, because I'm not saying that. It's important to consult out-the-box thinking, because there might be something that we haven't thought of as politicians. But the strategic decision must lie with myself and the combined authority.
Thank you, Mayor. Just give us a sec. So we're just working out what the best way of getting what you want into the next meeting, and I think that's via the work plan, and we're suggesting that you bring it up with at the leaders' briefing. So,
just to go back to that point, then. So, I absolutely accept decisions have got to be made, and absolutely, of course, you know, the whole point, and it's just it's the clarity on the recommendation, because that. So we're all, if we're to assume that we're to accept the premise of the 5% and what it's trying to achieve, but there are opportunities for people to refine, you know, what the purpose behind some of the priorities are. That's not quite what the recommendation says. So that's why I'm not trying to be obstructive. It's not what the recommendation says. So now, if there's a way of doing that, to enable people to have their say still and for us to bring it back. I mean, the work programme is clearly one mechanism of that.
Lee.
So Ruth may well want to add to this, but this paper is about funding allocation. It's about ensuring that each organisation has got the resource it needs to deliver the outcomes that it needs to deliver. Clearly, as has been said, the combined authority needs to be able to deliver just like everybody else. There are a number of things, as Ruth has highlighted, that the money will be spent on. Some of that is supporting the development of a local transport plan. The local transport plan, you'll all be engaged in the development. This board will be considering the local transport plan, and clearly that will start to set out ambitions and priorities and a joined up view of where resources should be allocated in the future. So the default work programme of this board will do many of the things that I think you're asking for, because we will be moving from 3 distinct propositions into something that is more integrated and aligned. Now, there will be strategic opportunities within that, and there'll be local need within that, and that I think is clear and to be expected. So I think it happens naturally, but this is to kickstart that process in the most simple terms, to enable capacity to be put in place for transition to happen, for schemes to come forward, and for the appropriate policies to be developed and refined. And that is the essence of it. So I wouldn't suggest that the recommendations are amended at this point, but I would recognise the fact that the work programme will need to be mindful of the points that are being made by the board and ensure that that is reflected in future papers that come forward.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
I just want to, we've got media in here and I've seen how media can twist things. So I just want to get something on record. I can see a few smiling faces here. Now, this money is needed. To me, what is the point of having a combined authority if you don't devolve these powers? I can understand constituent authorities being reluctant to, especially on a transport budget, to give some of it away, but the money comes to us anyway now, and we are devolving it, some of it, the majority of it at the moment, to the constituent authorities. But let's look at the reality. We need investment to be able to deliver. At the moment, we've got a handful of staff, officers who are doing a great job. They're pulled in 10 different directions at the moment, especially Lee and Ruth, etc. And I know that Lisa is as well. And we need the capacity. And how can you put a transport plan together? We've now got a fantastic transport lead here who's only just started. But how can you actually, we haven't got the capacity to deliver this miraculous plan at the moment until we've got the staff to work with all the stakeholders. So I want it on record, we are not trying to pinch funding from the constituency authorities. We are devolving funding still, but we need the capacity to grow and go into a delivery model. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Unless there's any other questions or comments, then I'm going to move along. So it's on the recommendations which are on page 21 of the report pack. Do I have a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Ingrid. Okay, so we will now vote on that. All those in favour? Unanimous. That, again, is unanimous. Thank you all very much. The recommendations are therefore carried. Item number 9 then is the Transport for Greater Lincolnshire Terms of Reference. We move to the next item. The report outlines the strategic objective terms of reference and proposed membership of the Transport for Greater Lincolnshire, glasses again, which is referred to as TFGL, which will coordinate transport initiatives under the new Local Transport Authority role created by the devolution deal. The report's recommendations that the board, 1, endorses the strategic objectives of the Transport for Greater Lincolnshire, 2, recommends the Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority to establish Transport for Greater Lincolnshire as an advisory group, and 3, recommends to the Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority to adopt a terms of reference and appoint a membership of Transport of Greater Lincolnshire. I will in a moment invite Andy Gutherson, who is the interim transport lead, to introduce the report. However, Andy, I'd just like to thank you for all the work that you have done for the GLCCA as interim transport lead. Your work has been very much appreciated, and as that body misses you, we welcome you back to Lincolnshire County Council, even with that dreadful Movember moustache.
At least you've noticed the moustache, Chairman, so thank you.
Oh my God.
As you know, the whole purpose of Movember is to get people talking about men's health, and so I appreciate the recognition of that and recognition of the work and effort that has gone into working to get the Combined Authority established and get us to the point where we are today. I will continue to obviously represent the County Council's role in the Combined Authority as a Transport and Highway Authority. Just very quickly then, in terms of the report in front of you, just to remind you, the devolution deal had some very specific requirements in respect of what the Combined Authority does in terms of establishing partnerships, relationships, particularly bilateral arrangements with Great British Railways, National Highways, Active Travel England. The Mayor has made it very clear that she also wants Transport for Greater Lincolnshire to be established. This paper sets the criteria for that. So paragraph 5 sets out the aims. Paragraph 7 sets out the core membership. Paragraph 9 clarifies that if other members are required on an as and when basis can be invited along, and the appendix includes the terms of reference. The Clear intention of this group is to bring the leads from different transport groups together to act as a sounding board, steering group, consultation group, an engagement group, a group to actually carry out work on behalf of the transport board to actually move matters along. So the board are invited to agree the establishment of TFGL, endorse the objectives and adopt the terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Does any member have a question or wish to comment? Councillor Brockwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, having had my oops moment for the meeting today by asking part of my question in the wrong place, I'll now ask it in the right place, which is always useful. I think this is really good that you're drawing in so many people from so many sectors, very inclusive, and the transport leads. But given that it is a wide-ranging committee, this is where I wanted to ask, is there any reason why we can't have somebody from the District Joint Committee on here? Because that's where an awful lot of the groundwork is done, the understanding of the local transport needs. So one person in there isn't going to make a vast amount of difference to numbers, but it would make a difference to inclusivity. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Does anybody want to come back on that? Andy.
So the report's been written on the basis that that isn't an exclusive list of members, and as I said, paragraph 9 makes it clear that other organisations, other bodies can be invited along as appropriate. It's a question for the board of whether they want to specifically include a representative from the district committee, or whether leave it open on the basis that there is that freedom and flexibility within the proposal that's in front of you.
Thank you, and it's useful to have that in the right place. So I tend to agree with you on that. I was a little confused earlier, I'll be honest. Any more comments from anybody? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Since you've mentioned that my role is to pick up on the typos and such like, and I know the Mayor is very keen on grammar and literacy, lobbies for investment doesn't have an apostrophe. That's not my main point, but that is in the terms of reference for Transport for Greater Lincolnshire on the 5th bullet point down. Paragraph 7 in the main report about core membership doesn't tally with the membership in the appendix. Is it supposed to? And which one is it? If it's the one that includes voluntary transport representative and taxi private hire, what is going to be the method by which we recruit and appoint those members of the authority? Because there are quite a lot of taxi operators, taxi drivers, private hire vehicle operatives and so on. By what mechanism will we ensure that they are represented? Is it nominations? I don't know. And finally, if we are in the age of a sound bite, I would like that this committee does seriously consider the advantages of sometimes working from home.
Well, that's not for now. Andy.
So in terms of the first question, yes, it is the list that includes reference to the private hire sector and the voluntary transport representatives. As with other representative groups, we will reach out to those groups. They have bodies that act as representative bodies, and we will seek nominations from them accordingly to actually bring it forward. It is intended to be a representative group, and therefore we would expect them to bring views forward from their wider membership. And also when the group is sort of set up effectively, it will reach out, it will act as an engagement body, so there will be wider engagement opportunities for those people who maybe is not fully affiliated into those groups to also have their say and make their views accordingly.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from anybody? Okay. On the recommendations as detailed on page 30 of the report pack, do I have a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. We will now vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all in favour again, so unanimous. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you. For clarity, have you just agreed the terms of reference as in Appendix A?
We've endorsed them.
But the advice from Mr Gutherson was that the list on page 34, is it? The list that's within the terms of reference is incorrect.
We will update the appendix to make sure that correctly reflects what's in the actual report, if that's acceptable to the board.
Chair, that's not what you've just done, but that does sound like a pragmatic way of going forward.
When it goes to authority for approval, we'll get it altered there. Thank you. Fantastic then. Item 10, the Rural Transport Group. We move to the next item. This reports back on the board for the development of the Rural Transport Group, referred to as an RTG, and the next steps which are to be taken in the lead to the launch event. Report's recommendations are that the board notes the continuation of the work to establish a mayoral rural, gosh, that's not easy to say, is it? Rural Transport Group. I would like to invite Lana, Medley, Strategic Transport Lead, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll refer to it as RTG, I think. So this report sets out the work which has been undertaken since the last Transport Board on establishing the Mayoral Rural Transport Group. The report sets out the proposed functions of the group and the focus for the group around policy, knowledge sharing, research, support for devolution and promoting innovation. Membership of the group will be made up of mayors of authorities with a rural interest, as well as leaders of county authorities who are going through the devolution process and will likely be engaging their mayors in the future, as well as stakeholders from national transport organisations and government departments. So in advance of the Westminster launch, an initial rural transport evidence base is being produced, which will set out kind of evidence of the contribution rural areas make to the UK economy and building that case for rural investment. It will be looking at the evidence of funding per capita for local authorities in rural areas, and then really looking at how the Rural Transport Group can raise the profile of rural areas and their contribution to UK PLC. Officers of the GLCCA have engaged with other officers of mayoral authorities, along with DFT, DEFRA and sub-regional transport bodies to promote the group, and responses have been really positive, with a desire to be involved in this national conversation on rural transport. So, as stated by the Chair, members are asked today to note the continuation of this work programme and provide any comments on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now open it up to any members for questions or comments. Well, I've got a quick question. Selfishly, diary gets quite busy. I know that the plan was for the launch to be reasonably soon. Is there any update that you can give us on that in that regard?
The launch for the meeting won't be until the new year. So we are looking at potential dates sort of towards the end of January now for that launch, but we do have MP sponsorship for the group. We do have engagement with Office, we do have engagement with Westminster, so we're confident that we'll have that date confirmed and invites out very shortly.
Can I come in here, Chair? Yep. As we've got media here, we could again twist this. If we can put some context to this as well. Cross-party, we've approached MPs to host this in Westminster in Parliament, because we've also got a DFT, Department for Transport, officer, which will be part of our Rural Transport Group. So unfortunately, there's been some issues with the MPs securing a room, because Christmas is a very busy time. So unfortunately, due to that, it's been moved to January. We thought it was important to have it in Westminster, actually, because we want the decision makers there, we want their money to influence, to ensure that the rural lens through transport is heard by decision makers in government.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it makes life a little bit easier because I'd already booked a train down to London for that day, which was a bit too late. So I was going to have to cancel that, and so it's good news for me. Councillor Leyland.
Thank you, Chair. Just recognising the position we're in as a non-constituent group, but I think this is such an important subject. I do hope that there will be opportunities for districts to partake in the debate and what goes forward to the national body that this creates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. It's a actually really exciting development opportunity for us all. And I don't know what the outcome of it will be with regards to districts, but I'm really excited, particularly excited about this. I think it's a great opportunity. Mayor.
Look, when we finally do launch it in January, you know, everybody will be invited. You know, you're equally as important to Lincolnshire as myself and everybody else in the combined authority. So you will get the invites, and I think it's important that you're there as well, because you know we want to sing from the same hymn sheet. And I think consecutive governments, far too much has been through the urban lens. And this is our opportunity, cross-party, to make sure our voice is heard for the rural community.
Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That's really music to my ears to hear that the districts are going to be included. And also, it is, Councillor Leyland is right, and you're right, this is so exciting. This is so core to who we are. We are very enthusiastic and very supportive of this going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, what we do through the Rural Transport Group, we make sure that it comes through here. So it obviously gets scrutiny as well through our great chair. And also that you're hearing what these stakeholders, because it's mainly going to be the strategic transport stakeholders and organisations of what's achievable, and we here can nudge them. So it's looking what's achievable, this great plan for the county, bring it through here, get the scrutiny, and help shift things slightly so we can go back to them to push back even further. So that's what we was looking at, really.
Councillor Waltham.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'd just echo the comments that other colleagues have made around this. It's good news that we're going to get this recognition. It's also particularly important that our mayor is here, you know, championing the cause. Clearly, as the proof of the pudding is always in the eating, it needs some resource. It needs to have impact. Otherwise, you know, it just becomes another talking shop. And however well-meaning the ambition, it will need that government commitment. And I think, you know, given that we've asked them on other papers to connect with us, you know, they need to not only make sure that they connect with it with the purpose of contributing towards the debate, as the Mayor has said, which is good and important, but, you know, if they're really going to balance the economy in the way that we know it needs to be, cited on the challenges we have in rural areas, which are significant. They're always, you know, there's always, everyone talks about urban deprivation, you know, that's not to be discounted, but, you know, the challenges in rural areas and the inequalities that are just natural to the challenges that you come from living in a sparse area are things that we are here to tackle. So, you know, it's welcomed, but, you know, it's to be hoped that the resource comes with it.
Thank you. I think it falls upon all of us in this room to make sure it isn't a talking shop. I'd be heartbroken if it ended up being like that. We've got to fight to make sure that it's more than just that. But I take your point.
Right. Mayor as well. Sorry, I'm calling you the Mayor. I'm not passing over the mantle to you, Sean.
Thank you.
Chair, I meant Chair. Yeah, exactly. Look, it won't become a talking shop, but I think we're going to be lobbying government, as the chairman said, it's all our responsibility. But I think as well with the combined authority, this is what the great exhibition was. We need to look for investment, private sector investment, because look how we've seen in the transport funding rounds, we've been missed completely. And we've seen political parties, they naturally put the money in areas and it gets neglected elsewhere. So we've not only got to fight, but we've also got to have a plan B to look for other investment as well. So it won't become a talking shop. It's a case of, look, we need to be strategic. If the government are not giving us money, we need to find it elsewhere.
Thank you, Mayor. Any more questions from anybody or comments? Okay, thank you. Thanks for those questions and comments. On the recommendations as detailed on page 37 of the report pack, do I have a proposer? And a seconder? And thank you. We'll now vote. Please raise your hands. All those in favour? Unanimous again. Thank you all very much. Those recommendations are carried. Item 11 then, just let me get my glasses. It's very sad getting old, isn't it? Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Plan, a proposed work programme and scope of ambition. We move to the next item, item 11, a proposed work programme and scope of ambition. This report reports back to the board on the proposed work programme to produce a new GLCCA local transport plan and set out the next steps for producing the local transport plan. The report's recommendations are that the board, 1, reviews and comments on the attached report, and 2, supports the commencement of the scoping exercise and requests a report back to the next meeting with the finding of the LTP scoping exercise, including consultation and engagement programme. I would like to once again invite Andy Gutherson, the Executive Director of Place at Lincolnshire County Council, to introduce the report. Andy.
On this occasion, Lana is going to take up this one.
And now it's Lana.
No problem at all. Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the 5-stage programme for the development of the local transport plan. It then sets out the progress made on each of those stages, given the work previously undertaken on the LTP Light and in the period since the last Transport Board met. The report sets out the need to map stakeholder and public engagement, as well as an indicative timescale for each part of the work programme coming forward. The report sets out what we expect to deliver at each quarter and what members can expect to see coming forward to future transport boards as the work develops. To reiterate, there's a commitment from all of the constituent authorities and the GLCCA to deliver this policy at pace. There's a requirement for the Mayor to bring forward a local transport plan for Greater Lincolnshire, and as agreed at the previous Transport Board and Scrutiny Committee, members will be regularly updated on progress of the policy development, with this report being the first of those updates. So members are asked to support the continuation of the work programme and provide any comments on the report.
Thank you, Lana. Now, oh, yes. As with the Local Transport Funding Report, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee considered this report at the meeting last week. We have the Independent Chair, Andy Corby, to present the committee's comments. Andy.
The Scrutiny and Overview Committee looked at this and raised many comments that were very similar to ones raised about other topics. We had concerns about the timescales for the project and any risks of slippages, especially considering the dependency on third parties and stakeholders from that. There was a stressing item to ensure that the needs of the diverse amount of communities across the county were considered, and that assurances were that the early work done by LTP Light were included, and that assurances will be built into the plan that gave appropriate assurance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. I open out now to the other members. Is there any questions or comments? Nope. Okay. So we now move on to the recommendations as detailed on page 41 of the report pack. Do I have a proposer? And a seconder. Thank you both. All those in favour then please raise your hand. And that's unanimous once again. Thank you all. Those recommendations are carried. Right, moving on to item 12 then, the Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Authority Transition Report. This report's updated the board on the programme and seeks agreement on the principles of the programme, along with the delegating of the implementation to the Chief Operating Officer. The report's recommendations are that the Board, 1, receives an update on the GLCCA Transport Transition Programme, 2, discuss and agree the principles of the Transport Transition Programme, and 3, delegates the implementation of the programme to the Chief Operating Officer of the GLCCA, including the development of the inter-authority agreement. I'm just looking down now to find out whether it really is you or not. I'd like to invite Andy Gutherson, Interim Chair, Transport Lead, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. When the Combined Authority was established, as members are aware, we had concurrent powers reflecting the move from the 3 separate transport authorities into the one. That within the deal was a 1-year transition period. That transition period is therefore sort of 6 months in, and therefore the essence of this work that's been carried out between the 3 constituent authorities and latterly with the support of the Combined Authority is to make sure that the ongoing arrangements that are required for the transition of those powers into the Combined Authority are done, to coin a phrase, in a safe and legal manner for all of our sort of sakes. What that now has resulted in is 5 main programmes of work, which are identified in paragraph 11. Some of those activities have been mentioned earlier this afternoon, such as the LTP, Transport for Greater Lincolnshire, the RTG, and the relationship between the 3 highway authorities and the Transport Authority in respect of allocations of funding and delivery of work and schemes, all integral to how we continue to operate collaboratively across Greater Lincolnshire. Point 5 relates to the ongoing operational delivery activity in respect of public transport activities. As all of the members will be aware, the 3 constituent authorities currently provide a level of service through various contracts, subsidies to ensure that the public transport operations that are in place across the 3 areas are delivered in an effective way. At this moment in time, come the 1st of April, I think it's fair to say the Combined Authority is not in a position to pick up and run with that role without creating difficulties and risks to us all. So the inter-authority agreement that is referenced is a mechanism to make sure that those arrangements continue, but with the legal transfer of those powers for a minimum of a 1-year period. And the important issue for the board, hopefully, is in the context of the delegation of that authority to the Chief Operating Officer, is we don't need to come back to this board again for any further sign-off, because there will be an awful lot of detailed legal work required to make sure that's fit for purpose for the 1st of April. So hopefully the members will recognise and understand that this is a continuation of the work and activities that we've got in place, but with a view to ultimately being able to develop a resource plan and ultimately some staffing requirements that will be required for the Combined Authority to take on elements of the roles, but by establishing those principles, the next stage of that work can be done and progressed accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Does any member have any question or wish to comment? No? Okay. In that case, moving on to the recommendations as detailed on page 47 of the report pack. Do I have a proposer? And a seconder? Philip, thank you both very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And once again, that is unanimous. Those recommendations are carried. Well, thank you all very much. That now concludes the business of the meeting for today. The next meeting of the Greater Lincolnshire Transport Board is scheduled for Wednesday, the 14th of January, 2026. Next year, that sounds dreadful, doesn't it? At 2 p.m. Thank you all for attending, and I now close the meeting at 3:28. Thank you very much.